I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon, Mr. Nick Behrens. Nick has over 2 decades' experience representing business and researching issues affecting business. He's responsible for driving CCIQ's advocacy agenda in all areas impacting on the private sector, such as taxation, regulatory environment, employment legislation, transport and infrastructure issues. I think you're busy. His extensive experience on numerous committees and forums with representation on a number of high-level government committees appointed by state and federal government ministers. Nick is recognised for his strong leadership skills and revels in presenting to various audiences. He was additionally a corporate ambassador for the Bank of Queensland as part of a successful sporting career. His career objective is to provide effective leadership for the business community and to promote and represent the interests of Australian business. He wishes to work with government and other groups to shape economic and social environments in a way that promotes business growth. Can I welcome Nick to the microphone?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. CCIQ is absolutely delighted to be here today. We're particularly interested in the challenges that face regional Australia, and we're certainly committed to ensuring vibrant and successful regional Queensland communities. For those of you who don't know about the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland, and indeed we are a very well kept secret, we have been in existence for over 140 years, providing a voice on behalf of small business. Now, if you were to describe what that means, we happen to think that we're very good at listening to what small business has to say, and then what we do is we package it up in a digestible and accessible format, and we convey it to those stakeholders who have the privilege of making decisions that impact back on small business. Much of the presentation that you will see today is a direct reflection of us going out and asking small businesses what their issues and challenges are, particularly an extensive process in regional Queensland. And ladies and gentlemen, we're unashamedly geared towards providing small business a voice, quite simply because there's 406,000 Queensland small businesses. 97% of the entire business community is small business. To put some metrics around it, they provide about a third of Queensland's gross state product. That's over $100 billion. But more importantly, to our mind, they give over 1 million Queenslanders a job. They provide a livelihood to families that enable families to leave a legacy. We're very proud of small business. Unlike other states, Queensland has a truly decentralised economy with a small business footprint across the length and breadth of this proud state. And again, what I'm here to talk about is the challenges and issues. In 2015, CCIQ received feedback from over 1,200 Queensland businesses on key issues, challenges and constraints that they believed must be addressed in order to grow regional economies. Close to 90 issues were identified across the length and breadth of this expansive state, and this slide highlights the top 10 for the 2 defined parts of Queensland. The first major point that I wish to make today is that the top issues of importance to business do not vary dramatically between South East Queensland and regional Queensland. For example, cost of energy, levels of economic activity and demand, cost and access to communications and a suitable transport network, and workforce issues such as workplace health and safety, penalty rates, unfair dismissals and finding the right employees are common to all parts of this state. The only exception is local government, which is significantly more an issue of importance for regional Queensland, which I will speak to shortly. However, this is the second major point that I wish to make, and that is the severity of these issues is significantly more acute for regional Queensland businesses than they are for South East Queensland businesses. CCIQ constructed an index score out of 100, and for each of the first 9 issues, you can see a noticeable difference in severity between the 2 geographical locations. Today's presentation is about explaining why these issues tend to be more profound in regional Queensland than they are for South East Queensland. So the first issue is the cost of energy. And we have seen a doubling of electricity prices for regional Queensland business over the past decade. an unbelievable 113% increase in fact, compared to a CPI increase over the same period of only 31%. This has created enormous challenges for regional Queensland businesses trying to remain competitive. CCIQ firmly believes that ongoing price increases experienced in the past decade are unsustainable, and Queensland businesses cannot continue to absorb these additional costs. For some businesses in regional Queensland, it is a crisis issue, as energy costs represent in excess of 20% of their operational costs. And very importantly, electricity is increasingly becoming price inelastic for regional Queensland businesses. Many businesses have communicated they have done all that they can to reduce their energy usage. And at the same time as being unable to reduce usage, their ability to pass costs on to the consumer is diminished through fierce competition and prevailing tough economic conditions. Accordingly, most rises have had to be absorbed and has progressively squeezed their profitability and in some instances forced them irreparably into the red. But the difference between regional Queensland and South East Queensland is that SEQ is moving to a fully deregulated market post 1 July 2016. There are in excess of 15 retailers who will compete for market share by offering more competitive offers to SEQ consumers. Regional Queensland, however, is another matter, with insufficient competition at present. Ergon Retail is virtually a monopoly retailer. All but large users are on notified prices, and the uniform tariff policy, though vitally needed and lowers prices, also stifles competition. Accordingly, CCIQ supports the Queensland Productivity Commission recommendation that the uniform tariff policy be transferred from Ergon Retail to the distribution entity of Ergon, or as they will now be known as Energy Queensland. This should, at least in theory, open the way for potential competition, although it will not address the lower population densities but also undermine retailers entering the market. In addition, CCIQ holds high hope that solar and battery walls will inevitably enable small business to move off the grid to avoid costly network costs. Many of you are no doubt aware that Queensland's domestic economy over the past 2 years has been contracting. It has only been through our exports that the Sunshine State has avoided a recession. Let's be clear, the Sunshine State's domestic economy has been in negative growth for more than 2 consecutive quarters. In fact, it's been 8 quarters. The downturn in global demand for our resource, a hung state parliament undermining business certainty, market volatility that is undermining consumer confidence, and drought conditions across much of the state is unquestionably leading to widespread difficulty in our economy. And employment and unemployment are lag indicators. Indeed, as a result of a domestic economy in widespread difficulty, unsurprisingly, unemployment is on the rise. The trend unemployment rate for Queensland bottomed out at 6% in February 2016 and is currently at 6.4%, well above the national average at 5.7%. However, the picture for much of regional Queensland is significantly worse, with direct exposure to the downturn in the resources sector and also the drought. Key areas such as Cairns, Fitzroy, Mackay, Outback Queensland, Townsville and Wide Bay all have regional unemployment rates well above the state average. Furthermore, Queensland's regional youth unemployment rates are sobering. The state's youth unemployment rate of 12.8% is double the state average. It is becoming increasingly difficult for younger Queenslanders across regional parts of the Sunshine State to find a pathway into the workforce. Again, Cairns, Outback Queensland, Townsville and Wide Bay all have regional youth unemployment rates well above the state average. And many of you already understand that population flows towards economic and employment opportunity. As job opportunities have dried up as a result of the resources downturn, people have moved away from regional Queensland. The end of the mining boom and broader economic sluggishness have no doubt contributed to Queensland falling to 5th place in terms of population growth among Australian states and territories. Queensland is not attracting overseas or interstate migrants to the same extent as it has in the past. In periods when net migration to Queensland was high, such as several years in the 1990s and 2000s, Queensland was number 1 in population growth in Australia. We have now fallen to 5th place. And since mid-2014, Queensland's population has been growing at a slower rate than the rest of Australia's. And again, the regions have borne the brunt through this shifting population. The issue for business in regional Queensland is effectively a triple whammy. Many regional businesses are in the supply chain to the resources and agricultural sectors and have in turn experienced a downturn. We know this. But at the same time, declining employment opportunities and unemployment have further compounded things with reduced spend across the local economies. The third aspect is actual population shifts. CCIQ is aware that there are many businesses defying this negative trend and are in an ascendancy, but in general we can see why levels of demand and economic activity is a serious issue for regional Queensland's small businesses at present. But I want to highlight a positive note. The lower Australian dollar is benefiting our tourism industry, international education, import competing manufacturing and our state's exporters. The lowest interest rates on record are lowering mortgage repayments, but is in turn boosting disposable income and household expenditure. Improved weather is also starting to impact positively. It's starting to rain where needed, and the sun is shining when wanted. We are indeed a complex economy with unique climate challenges. It is through these positive factors we are seeing the state slowly edging back towards positive growth, although we note that this journey will be longer and tougher for regional Queensland. When asking Queensland businesses what influences most any decision to move to regional areas of the state, the most important issue for them is connectivity. Connectivity either through the road network or connectivity through telecommunications infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, Infrastructure Australia has estimated that telecommunications infrastructure provides a $2.8 billion economic contribution to Queensland, with this forecast to grow to $6 billion over the next 20 years. Accordingly, it is important that regional Queensland's telecommunications infrastructure is able to deliver for the emerging digital economy and its opportunities. With the advent of the digital economy, the tyranny of distance can effectively be mitigated. Regional Queensland businesses with superior products and services will be able to compete on the world stage. Yet the competitiveness of regional Queensland businesses and their ability to access Australian and global markets is determined to a large extent by their ability to access internationally competitive communications infrastructure. It is commonly recognised that Australia is lagging behind other developed countries in terms of the speed, access to and reliability of broadband services. Many Queensland regions are experiencing internet broadband coverage concerns, which are reducing businesses' capacity to utilise online and digital technology, subsequently impacting on their ability to compete in the increasingly global marketplace. Delivering a strong, reliable and affordable communications network is fundamental to encouraging innovation and improving the ability of all businesses to compete domestically and internationally, which is particularly important for a state with a population geographically dispersed as Queensland's. In respect to the NBN, 70% of businesses believe it represents a good investment and will make a positive difference to their business. 2 in 5 businesses believe it will revolutionise the way that they do business, yet 40% do not yet know when the NBN will be rolled out in their region. We must get this essential piece of infrastructure right. Despite an unquestionable softening of the regional Queensland labour markets, many businesses continue to experience skill and labour shortages. Consultation and feedback from our regional members is that they want to hire Australian workers. However, skill shortages, particularly in certain Queensland regions, have precluded businesses from using local workers to fully meet their staffing requirements in the short to medium term. This has meant that employers need to consider engaging a skilled foreign worker through one of the various channels for temporary skilled migration. This problem is a geographical one, where Australians have an embedded reluctance to reside away from the eastern seaboard and major population centres. The population declines, as already cited, compounds this issue as whole families move away from local communities. The role of regional universities across this state and other learning institutions such as TAFE are so crucially important. Our strongest advice to younger Queenslanders is to get the level of education that maximises the chance of them receiving secure ongoing employment, something that no doubt would resonate with you all. Also crucial to regional businesses is the role councils play in building and sustaining their local economies. In short, local government is significantly more important in regional Queensland. On a statewide basis and for South East Queensland, the three most important roles for local government considered by business are roads, planning and development, and council-administered facilities and services. But for regional businesses, the top three most important roles of local government are economic development, and then roads, and then planning and development. Due to the downturn in the resources sector, the importance of council economic development has never been more important in regional Queensland, and there is vital need for local government to be involved in diversifying their respective economies. I don't wish to dwell too long on IR-related issues, other than to say penalty rates are one of the major issues affecting Queensland businesses when it comes to industrial relations. In a modern 24/7 economy, Australia's workplace laws need to reflect the dynamic nature of the new working week and allow businesses to tailor their staffing arrangements to respond to peak demand periods from customers. Queensland small businesses accept penalty rates as a legitimate labour cost, but want to see alternative approaches for specific industries. The current penalty rates regime inhibits economic growth by providing a disincentive to employers from having longer trading hours or offering staff additional hours of employment. The most notable recommendation from the recent Productivity Commission inquiry into the Fair Work framework was penalty rates have a legitimate role in compensating employees for working longer hours and at unsociable times. They should be maintained. However, Sunday penalty rates for cafes, hospitality, entertainment, restaurants and retailing should be aligned with Saturday rates. With much of regional Queensland dependent upon tourism to diversify their economic base, penalty rates is a core issue. And all eyes will be watching the Fair Work Commission when it hands down its decision on penalty rates in July next month. Ladies and gentlemen, CCIQ believes every person in the workplace should have a safe place of work, and all parties have a duty of care to achieve this. However, a particular issue that is now actively being addressed by the Office of Fair and Safe Work Queensland is that if small business spends too much time identifying compliance, then this has an opportunity cost that is detracting from meaningful actions that actively improve safety in the workplace. Key issues for regional businesses in workplace health and safety include there are excessive paperwork and documentation requirements, there are burdensome staff induction and training responsibilities, and there are multiple codes of practice. The Office of Fair and Safe Work Queensland is an example of a regulator who is getting it right, with emphasis on education and awareness as opposed to prosecution and enforcement. But just on the issue of red tape, 78% of regional businesses indicate they experience a moderate to major impact from complying with government regulation. That's up from 72% in 2013. Common themes included regulation to be unnecessarily complex, regulation is unnecessarily strict, it is poorly explained by regulators at times, and it is too strictly and inconsistently enforced by regulators. The majority of Queensland businesses indicate that overall cost and time of regulatory compliance has increased across the past 2 years. 1 in 4 businesses state that red tape compliance has prevented them from making changes to grow their business and/or directly impacted on their profitability. This compares to 1 in 5 businesses in 2013. One of the greatest disparities between South East Queensland and regional Queensland is in the area of environmental regulation. It did not feature in the top 10 as it has a significant impact, but only on a narrow segment of the business community. But the gap between South East Queensland and regional Queensland was the widest of any issue, and no doubt largely related to what sits off the northeast of this coast, which is the Great Barrier Reef. In turning to cost and access to transport, Infrastructure Australia has identified a macroeconomic cost of $9 billion by 2031 if delays to inadequate transport networks in Queensland are not addressed. But for regional businesses, what the impact of this $9 billion looks like is increased cost of doing business, decreased efficiency and productivity, reduced access to existing and expansion into new and emerging markets, vulnerability to seasonal weather events, and reduction in the livability of a region and, in turn, workforce. Regional businesses need capacity, reliability, efficiency and safety improvements in much of our regional road network. Last week's state budget has allocated over $10.7 billion in 2016-17 to Queensland infrastructure and $40 billion over the next 4 years. These are seemingly impressive numbers. However, CCIQ is concerned at the decreasing proportion of the state budget that is being allocated to infrastructure. As a percentage of the Queensland economy, infrastructure spend has declined from a peak of 6% in 2007-8 under Anna Bligh and Andrew Fraser to just 2.2% in 2015-16. CCIQ is recommending that Queensland commit to a minimum infrastructure spend of 4.25%, which is the decade average. On this basis, we would be spending an additional $5 billion each year on infrastructure, year on year. If we don't, the impact will be twofold. Firstly, we will continue to witness the recent trend of Queensland engineering construction businesses shifting to other states as work dries up here. But more importantly, we'll be underinvesting in Queensland's future infrastructure requirement. Ladies and gentlemen, at CCIQ, we like elections as it's always a great opportunity to secure government commitment to key infrastructure projects, and the last federal election was no exception. Queensland secured $8.4 billion from the Coalition in 2013 in the area of road funding alone. Key projects that were committed to were the Toowoomba Second Range Crossing, $700 million, the Bruce Highway upgrade, $6.7 billion, and the Gateway Motorway North, $1 billion. We only have to look to these projects to see that essential major infrastructure projects can reach building stage as a result of a federal election. Historically, Queenslanders look at political or election pork barrelling in a negative light, but CCIQ sees it differently, provided they are targeted at projects with high economic value. Quite simply, this federal election will be one of only a few very limited opportunities for Queensland to secure the Commonwealth commitment required to fund our vitally needed projects for regional Queensland. And there is no question that Queensland has proven itself to be a key battleground for the federal election. In short, the Australian Labor Party needs an additional 21 seats to win office, with an Australian-wide two-party preferred swing of 4.3% required. On this basis, there are 10 electorates within Queensland that are in play and up for grabs. We have already seen key commitments from the Coalition and the ALP to projects such as Townsville's Eastern Access, Townsville Sports Stadium development, a number of dams across the Sunshine State, the NBN, the Port of Gladstone and Townsville's water infrastructure. Whilst I'm a little tongue-in-cheek about pork barrelling, if Queensland is aiming to have thriving communities and businesses that can compete increasingly on a global scale, government must set a vision and put in place an infrastructure plan that surpasses their own terms of political office. The reality is that politics in Australia is playing a too big a role in infrastructure decisions, potentially to the detriment of regional Queensland. Finally, CCIQ strongly believes that more needs to be done to restore the balance between employers and employees and prevent employers from having to go to the time and expense of defending themselves against baseless or vexatious unfair dismissal claims. The capacity to make decisions about staffing arrangements goes to the heart of an employer's ability to run their workforce. And we do not consider that such decisions in the ordinary course of things should require the payment of go-away money. Regional small businesses in particular struggle with unfair dismissal provisions as they generally lack the resources available to larger enterprises. When small businesses lack certainty and lack the time and money, go-away money replaces the intended procedures and processes due to the inefficiencies of the Fair Work system. This, in our view, is unjust. CCIQ favours a true exemption for regional Queensland small businesses, coupled with a clearer process for the termination of an underperforming employee, with more emphasis by the Commission placed on the substance of a claim. Whilst there are a number of common challenges that businesses face regardless of where they are located across Queensland, every region has unique nuances to those issues. These issues are front and centre for CCIQ. Regional businesses provide the foundation for economic growth, make investments in economic and community infrastructure, and provide employment opportunities and, in turn, a livelihood to families. CCIQ values the resilience, strength and vibrancy of our regional businesses and wants to ensure that they are afforded every opportunity to be able to grow and employ. Thank you.